Hello, Tony.
Hello, Tony.
Tony and Tonie Show.
Once again,
Yeah, we're back. We're back, man. How are
we are
you?
indeed. I'm doing all right, mate. It's a Friday
It's a
afternoon.
Friday, yeah.
Friday, right? So that
Okay.
makes always makes me feel better.
Well, and what also makes you feel better is a splendid new article on product learning.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. Just hot off the press.
Yes, and it's from
Feel
Phil
factor.
Factor. Phil Factor. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. It is. Well, he just makes a lot of articles.
We were just discussing him, weren't we?
Yeah.
He's a font of interesting ideas, especially around Flyway, and this is one of them. So
Yeah.
it's called. It's got quite a long title: Defusing Flyway Validation Errors Using Smarter Checksum Comparisons.
But is he actually just after a job in the Flyway team? Is that his goal in life?
You'd have to. We'll have to ask. We'll have to get him on
Yeah,
and
yeah.
ask him. We'll have to ask him.
No,
But
I think he just loves to pick interesting technical challenges.
yes, I think basically he's worked in the database industry since the 80s.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the real early pioneers of financial systems for banks and stuff like that. And I think he has a deep understanding of how you develop database applications. And he has, and he's been using Flyway deeply. And when he sees a need to handle a certain process a bit better, he looks
yeah.
for a way to automate it. So he's gold dust in that regard, really.
Well, and this particular article is about the checksum Flyway stores for every migration that has been executed, right?
Exactly right. So when it successfully applies a migration to a database, it stores a lot of information in the Flyway schema history table about that migration, and also in there it stores a little checksum. When you run another migration, it rechecks the checksums of the applied migrations to make sure they haven't changed, because it's trying to ensure version consistency.
And
And if one has changed, you've nipped in and done an edit, validation error.
if you look at Entity Framework Core, for example, they have nothing like that. So if you just
Ah,
there's a Flyway or sorry Entity Framework Core history table in the database, but they won't store anything. But if you look, for example, for other tools out there, there's this very bespoke, small, but powerful system called Great. It's open source, but it does have something similar like this. I both tested them in a precon. I did at Pass,
okay.
and what I did, I just altered a little bit of code, but not the real code, just the comments, and then Flyway detects it's wrong, and that's exactly what this article is about, right?
Exactly right. So the checksum it does is this is the diagram there is just an example of a checksum mismatch validation error because somebody's edited an existing migration file that's already been applied to that database. And it has to be a fast check because you could have a lot of migration scripts. So Flyway has to do it fast. So it's just a generic file level checksum calculation. So it knows the file's changed, but it has no idea why it changed, what changed. So um, you could have just a developer could have gone in there and actually done something what you'd call good changes, like
Mm-hmm.
added documentation to the code or just formatted it to adhere to a team standard. But that will trigger the validation error and migrations will come to a halt. So this article is really about like, is there a way you can not ideally you add all the documentation up front before you commit it to the shared team development branch, but just in case developers don't do that, you should the idea is there's never really a bad time to improve documentation.
Yeah,
so
well,
so let's make it easy. When those validations errors come up, is it just documentation that's been added, harmless changes? Phil
yeah, and
provides a little PowerShell script that does a
yeah,
more discriminate checksum.
yeah. So he calls it the SQL tokenizer.
Yes,
Yeah, and he will try to distinguish comments and real SQL code,
exactly right,
and
exactly right.
then he will try to take a SQL token checksum So with only the SQL code, and he will check if the SQL code changed and not the comments, right?
Exactly. You've just described it
I
perfectly.
read the article, so yeah, hey.
Yeah, no. It strips all the code into tokens, filters out any tokens it recognizes as being comments or just white space changes, and then just does the checksums between the original file that you've got out of source control and the current state of the file. If the checksums now match, so Flyway is telling you they don't match, but if they now match once you've taken out, cosmetic changes, then likely they are cosmetic changes only, and you can just run Flyway repair safely.
Well, it's interesting because from a DevOps point of view, with processes in place like pull requests and code reviews, you would have thought that these comments would be added earlier. But like you said, sometimes you just discover it while deploying it from test till QA, and then you said, "Oh, we need to add this here and here." So it could happen, but filtering out those white spaces and skipping that as a change, isn't that something that SQL Compare also can do? If you compare SQL files, there's like this option that you say, okay, ignore white spaces, right? You know that option?
I think it can. Yeah, maybe you're right. It can do that. Yeah, I hadn't
But
considered it.
I don't think it will do that with comments. So this technique is actually pretty interesting and could even be used in other Redgate tools. You see what I'm doing right here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
No, it's an
creating new
interesting point.
work for Phil. This is just
It's an interesting thought. I
yeah.
honestly hadn't considered it, but you're right. It could have multiple uses in that way with other tools.
Yeah.
I think, like, to your point about the workflow, I mean, it just above the diagram. It kind of makes clear that if this change has already been applied to production, say, and then you're retrospectively any retrospective change, any subsequent validation errors, you should do a really full drift check and work out exactly what changed, rather than, even if Phil's little code says actually it's probably only cosmetic.
Yeah.
If it's you should probably do something, a fuller check, because it's not fail safe. It's a regex process.
No.
It's cross database. It's been tested, but not.
But it could be an interesting option to get this SQL tokenizer into Redgate tools, just not as a PowerShell script like Phil just delivers it as a proof of concept, but more like an extra feature. So could be an interesting feature request.
What? Let's see. Yeah, I mean,
I
think
mean,
it's useful advice.
it is, and it was on the Tony and Tonie Show. So I mean, okay, folks, you heard it here first. This will be the next feature. No.
We shouldn't say no.
No,
It
no,
probably won't.
no,
But
no. But
anyway,
you can put it on what's the name? User voice. You can.
mhm.
So if Phil really likes this SQL tokenizer, or if one of our viewers really like this SQL tokenizer, it could be something that you can just incorporate in your tools. So for your bespoke tools, but maybe also for your standard tools.
Well, the tokenizer has been used in quite a few other articles to find external references, because it's essentially like just splitting the code into tokens and looking for specific like 4-part references, say. It can do all sorts of stuff like that. The version of the tokenizer in this article is quite pared down to make it as fast as possible. So it only does what it needs to do to recognize comment tokens and so on.
Okay, but it is again an interesting article of Mr. Phil.
It's
Mr.
I like it. I like it a lot.
I like it too, so I will click it. Yes. Thanks for your feedback.
All the code is in there for the tokenizer, for the function he builds out of that tokenizer to just do the discriminate checksum. And basically, it's a way for you to say, comment your code, format it the way you want it, and not, treat the validation errors as like a little warning, and then you can kind of verify the validation. If it really is harmless changes, just move on with your life, run a repair and move on. If they don't match still, then you've really got to investigate what exactly changed and why.
And of course, every change that has been done must go back in the pipeline of your DevOps process and put a source control, etc., etc. But it's more that you can now determine if it's a real change. So
exactly right.
And with
That's
that,
what it's about.
I have to cut you off now, Tony, because there's no Kent, still no Kent, and you don't believe this, but we're already at 10 minutes. 10
No.
minutes? Yes, Tony.
We've got to be more disciplined. This is terrible.
Yeah, someone has to take care of us.
I think the next one's going to be 3 minutes. Come on, let's have a.
Okay, let's do it.
We'll do it.
But for now, thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
And see you next time.
See you next time.